So we can kick it off. Welcome, everyone. We are here with Allison Wells in her studio and gallery in downtown New Bedford. So we are going to do a little studio visit with Allison here. And so she's going to walk us through and show us some of her work and give us a little bit of her background, art background, and we'll just have a little discussion and then a Q&A at the end. So Allison, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Allison Wells. I'm an artist and an art educator. I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, and I have been living here in New Bedford for 16 years. So 16 years ago, I came here to do my master's in fine art, and I was very determined that I would come and do a 3-year program for 2 years. And but that did not happen, So plans change, and 16 years later, I am here. Yeah, so I am a mixed media artist, a painter. As I said, I went to UMass Dartmouth, and when I graduated, I decided to stay because there was something happening in the city, like a renaissance of the arts. And New Bedford is known for its arts, from Swain School of Design, and which then went into UMass Dartmouth, and then a lot of the artists, they would come to do their art degree, but then they would leave. They would go, either they come from different parts of the country or outside of the country, so they'll do their program and leave. But around that time, which was 2004, I got here, and around that time we felt there was an energy, a renaissance of the arts. And so there were a lot of artists who were already established, setting roots. A lot of students from UMass Dartmouth, before they would come and leave, but now they were staying. They were renting affordable studios. They were being part of this movement. And I wanted to be a part of it too. That whole idea of doing it in 2 years out the door went away. So I stayed for the full 3-year program. And then I decided to, stay for another year and just see, what's going on. I worked, and this is when my first teaching job. So actually, I'm a teacher as well. I actually taught in Trinidad before I moved here. So I taught for 4 years at high school level. But part of the reason why I wanted to do my master's degree was so that I can teach at the college level. So that was a perfect thing. And UMass gave a great opportunity for me. Out of all the schools I looked at, UMass actually had a program where the grad students could teach. So I was able to teach at the college level while I did my master's degree, and that was wonderful. So that was the first time I taught at the college level. After that, I then taught at BCC, Bristol Community College, for 9 years, and that was a wonderful experience. While that was going on, I also taught at Artworks, right downtown New Bedford, and I taught like kids and teens for summer programs, after school programs. So I was very involved in the community, and that was really so interesting to me. It was funny because my mother always used to say, you'd make a great teacher. You should teach art. When God gives you a talent, you should share it. No way, I'm not teaching. I don't have the patience. Years ago. But my mother's always right, so I'm like, no. So I would fight it, but it came back, and I ended up teaching and loving it. Because I remember the first time I actually taught in front of a class was when I taught at high school in Trinidad. And I was so nervous because I thought, you can have a talent, you could be very talented at art. That doesn't mean you are a good teacher. But the first time I taught, I remember I just got such a rush, and the energy between the students and me was on. And I knew my mother was right. I knew I found something that I really loved, as much as I loved to paint. Mm-hmm. And so that was really great for me because it was the only job I had that I had while being an artist that I could come home and still want to do. So yeah. All the other jobs I had, you come home and you're just spent, you're burnt out. You don't feel to go in the studio. But something about you're teaching the actual thing that you do for a living, you're talking your talk, you're walking your walk. So it's part of it. You're fired up. So, so the first time I taught, I realized this is what I have to do. Because a lot of artists have other jobs on the side. And I said, I'm not doing anything that's so far off. I'm going to teach and do my art. And so that was a great thing for me. And so it continued when I was in New Bedford. And so after I graduated, I finally got a little studio upstairs in the Cummings building, downtown New Bedford. And that's where I was for like 7 years. And I showed my work in between. I opened for AHA Night. AHA is Arts, History, and Architecture. And that is a cultural night in New Bedford every second Thursday. So, I was getting a nice communication with the community, teaching, all of this. And so as time went by, it just keeps going. And I then got the opportunity to open my own gallery. And I had that in my mind. Sorry, did you say something?
Oh, no, that's what I was curious about, the transition from just having a studio downtown to then envisioning owning your own gallery and studio downtown. So, and not a lot of artists kind of make that leap. So I'm also curious about learning about that.
Well, you know what? The funny thing is that I allow, I put things out there. So I remember one day, like I had no interest in opening the gallery at that point. I wanted my studio, I was teaching, and somebody mentioned it to me. And, when I was a little girl, I actually used to say this all the time to my dad. And he reminded me when I opened the gallery. So I used to say, one day, and I was a little girl, like 10, one day I'm going to open an art gallery in Paris. So that's the funny thing, because I always make that joke. I mean, we're not in Paris, but New Bedford is the Paris of New England. So,
very true. I like that.
Yeah, that on an interview once, and everybody loved it. And I remember the Mayor Mitchell, made a joke. She said, Allison Wells says it's the Paris of New England. So that that was the transition. So I had that in my head when I was a little girl, and it just all of a sudden started to evolve. And I remember one summer, I opened the studio upstairs, and it was a busy day. It must have been like Summerfest or something was going on in the city. And I put my board out, and, slowly but surely, people were trickling in, coming in, and same with AHA Nights. And I remember feeling, I love this. I could do this. Like and I started to dream about having a space big enough that I can teach art, that I can exhibit my work as a gallery, and that I could have a studio where I can actually make the work. And I remember putting it out there, and then I just kind of left it. And I believe that when you do put your ideas out, you start to work toward it, but you can't just hold on to it for dear life. You have to release it, and it will come back to you. And I don't know how many years, it took a few years, and I wasn't actively trying to get a gallery, but things started to work. I had gotten a grant right around that time, an artist grant, and I was it for materials and different things. And right when I got the physical money in my hands, this space opened up. So I'm like, oh my God, that's a sign. So, and ask my family, everything is a sign for me. So I'm like, that is a sign. I have to do it. I just have to. And so, long story short, I took the plunge. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I believed in my dream, and I took the plunge, and now I'm in the gallery 6 years. I focused on it, was just like, I'm doing it 1 year at a time, step by step. You can't see further than the first 2 steps of the staircase.
Yeah. Wow. That is amazing. And that is definitely, that's kind of how most entrepreneurs have to look at it, like one day, one step at a time, and committing to your dream and taking those leaps, which are important and scary. You can't get to where you're going without taking those jumps or leaps of faith. But thank you for sharing that. I was wondering, can you speak about some of your paintings and your work and process?
So as I said, I'm a mixed media artist. I went to UMass Dartmouth to study painting, fine art painting. So I was trained classically in painting, But as time went by, I have always had a love for mixed media, textures in my work, collage. And it was funny that when I was in UMass Dartmouth, I'm working on these huge abstract paintings, and they're very intense. And then you have these intense critiques that last a day with the whole department and etc. You know about those.
Yes, I do.
So times for me to calm down, cool down when I'm back home, I would just do like tear up paper and do collages. Like collages has always been my little happy place, but my little secret happy place, right? I never did it for school. When I was at school, it was just little secret things that, I wasn't thinking it was like real art or, because I'm like focused on my fine art.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I did all these little, all these little collages. They were tiny little like squares. And I remember I had them in the studio at UMass, and they were just leaning up on the window. And I had a critique with my advisor. So my advisor came, and I had all the big abstract pieces on the wall for him to see. And this was in my final year. So he was starting to, think about what we're going to do for the thesis work. So he comes in, I work so hard on it, and he just walks by all the large pieces so fast. He's like, yeah, it's good, but it's not holding me. It's not holding me. I'm like, what? And then he looks and he's like, what are those on the wall? They were leaning up on the window. What are those on the window? My little collages. And he's like, that's where the answer is. And he didn't mean it had to be collage, but he was saying those pieces felt like I was not taking myself too seriously. Mm-hmm. Like the larger pieces, I was forcing it. I was trying so hard, but the little ones had this energy, had this kind of essence in it that was missing in the large ones. And that really just spun my whole idea and concept, because I knew exactly what he was saying, because I loved what I did with those. Mm-hmm. And you stop loving it, it becomes this kind of chore. It's a different thing. And so I did a whole new body of work for my thesis work after that meeting. Wow. Like I had up for him was like, and bad, but it didn't have that energy. So that just comes back to my love for collage. And so my work in the gallery here, a lot of mixed media collages. So I use acrylic paint, I use molding paste to lift off the surface. So a lot of the pieces would have textures coming off the surface, pushing back. I love negative and positive space. I love like this kind of ambiguous space. So the foreground, middle ground, background, but then they play together like an optical illusion. So for example, this piece behind me here, I don't know if I should turn it around. Is it?
Yeah, it's great. We can see it.
Oh, you can. Okay, good. So this piece here is called Beyond the Blues. So Beyond the Blues, and it's acrylic on canvas. And it's, I talk about in my work, visual and tactile texture. And tactile texture is what comes off the painting surface and that you can touch to the feel. This is a very smooth painting, but it's very, very textural. Mm-hmm. So I love to play with that. And this piece, it's one of my most popular pieces in the gallery. And I sell prints and cards of it, and they're very popular. People love the blue. Something about this piece mesmerizes people. I just love to see people enjoy it. They would stand in front of it for a long time, just taking it in. And would you believe I never once thought of underwater. But of course, everybody sees it, they feel underwater. Somebody said it was like an underwater forest.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I know it's great to hear a different input in how people receive your work, especially with your work being so abstract and thrill, and it has so many layers. But yeah, they're really so beautiful and stunning, and it's rare to see so many layers, especially done with you said it's all acrylic?
Yes. So acrylic for me, it's the best medium. Like I love oil as well. And you paint with oil, it's like butter, right? But when I do that mixed media, acrylic is better because It dries faster and it goes well with the other mediums. Like oil would not go with my paper collage. It will actually eat it eventually, right? But the chemicals in it would eat it. But the acrylic works well with that, and the molding paste and all of the different mediums I use from the acrylic medium.
That's great. And when did you create this piece? I was just wondering, I followed along your work. I know that I'm not, I was just wondering, like, do you have a certain series that you work on at a time, or a body of work? And what does that look like for you?
So this one was in 2018, and it's the series Unusual Growth Patterns. And I was fortunate enough, and that was another dream. You have to have a dream because they may come true, just like me having my gallery. So my dream when I was at UMass was to have a solo exhibition at the New Bedford Art Museum, because all of my professors would have shows there and they would invite us to the openings. And I would go, and the first time I went, I was just blown away. And like, I love the space, I love the energy, etc. And I eventually had one. I graduated in 2007, and I had it in 2018. So it took a while, but it still happened. It was in that show, and that's when I saw the power of this piece with viewers.
Yeah.
They always stopped on that piece, and I felt good because I remembered my professor, who I was talking about, who just walked past all the work and said it wasn't grabbing him, and that was Sig Haynes. I'm going to call his name out because
I was wondering who it was.
I know, Sig Haynes, and we called him the colorist. At UMass, he was known as the colorist. This man knows his color, and I have to say, I learned how to use color through him. So I came there as a graduate student, and I realized I did not know how to use color at all. And when I did one of his color theory classes, it all just changed. But anyway, I was really happy when people, like, even when they come in the gallery, a lot of the work, they stop and they linger with it, or they come back and they say they see more things. And I'm like, thank you for telling me that, because Sig Haynes used to say that is the power of good work. You want people to stop, pause, take in the piece. Then they move away, they want to come back, and then they're seeing new things. So every time somebody says they see new things every time they look at a piece, I take it as a compliment. That's what I want to happen.
Definitely. And that's what how I feel about your paintings. Like, they unfold and unfold, and that's what great art does. It keeps unfolding over time, even if you own it and it sits on your wall and you're looking at it and it keeps changing and working on you. So, that's great. I was gonna open it up to, I know we have a few people on the call, and I didn't know if we had any questions from anyone, specific questions for Allison about her work, or I can go ahead and ask more questions. But
I have a question, Allison.
Yep.
Do you feel like there's one source of inspiration for your ideas for your paintings, or do they just come from a whole variety of sources?
Yes. So as an artist, they do come from all, variety of sources. Also my environment, whether you know it or not, your environment does play a big role in your work. And so you see, even in art history, many artists moving to different locations, their works change, the color palettes change, the size, whatever. And that had definitely happened in my work. Like I'm from the Caribbean, so my work, and I've revisited that. So a lot of my work does have that Caribbean vibe to it, the movement, the colors. And I'll show you an example here. This piece here. Actually, I'm gonna turn. And I'm gonna click it over. Right, and you can see that?
Yes.
So this, the reason I wanted to show this, because this is one of my totem ladies. So this is a series of my work that I started in 2011, and it keeps growing and evolving. It started off as a piece I had, which was about ancestors. and about me being away from home, but I had my ancestors with me. And then it evolved. It evolved then to my sisters, because I come from a family of a lot of strong females. I'm the youngest daughter of 5, and I'm so close with my mother. So I started to show a variety of sisters. So you would see a row of these strong, elongated images of women, figures, rooted in the ground, growing, moving, curving, etc. And then they just started to evolve into many different styles. So here's one. And then, so this one is on this stage. So again, it's totems, it's figures, but then I incorporated my carnival culture. And so in Trinidad, we have carnival every February. And here, if you see closely, you can see the movement of the dancers, the masqueraders. And that's what I wanted to get, the energy of the pieces in the work, the energy of the people. Let's go to another one. This is another totem series, but this is when, so every time I revisit this series, it changes. So it started to be like crowds of people. Very decorative, again, influenced by carnival, my carnival culture, but we have the totems. Another one at the top, these are just 2 totems. Another one here, moon dancers. So these are almost like silhouettes. But again, these are 4. And then I would have 5 or 6. I have many different ones that show different movement, different forms, coming in with the carnival culture again. So that is a really important series that would not stop from my work. I started in 2011, and I remember this is quite a joke for me, private joke at home with me and my dad, because every time he's like, so what you working on? And I call him and I talk to him, I show him, I say, oh, well, I'm doing some more totems. He's like, more totems? When are you going to stop doing totems? And I'm like, well, I told him artists have been known for centuries to do like the same theme, revisiting it and doing it in so many different ways. And that's how I feel about the totems. So they will just keep growing and growing and evolving.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, those are very true to your sense of like history and self, and it's I love seeing that within artists' work and how that grows along with their practice through their lifetime. And I feel like the totem series is that for you.
Yes, and then I would just want to show you. So I found this piece has sold, but it was this is a print. I took it out of,
okay.
Yeah, so it's a very large piece, original. And this was a piece I was talking about in terms of the mother of the totems. So this piece was shown in my very first solo exhibition in New Bedford, actually in the US. So it was New Bedford, downtown New Bedford, at a place, do you remember the gallery Colo Colo?
Yes.
So 2009, I had my first solo exhibition, and this piece was there. It's a very large piece. And this was the birth of the totem. So after this, it then just evolved into the different types. I have one here. It's still in the plastic. But as you can see, they then, they take on many shapes and many forms, and they just keep evolving. And I love them. I love working on them. So all of that is to answer the first question, if there was a theme that I keep revisiting or that influences my work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. Great. Well, thank you. And if I don't know if we have any other questions. If not, we can move on to a brief introductory session, unless anyone has any questions for Allison. Well, thank you, Allison. And we'll after this, we'll to everyone on the call, I'll send out the information for each artist so everyone can kind of follow along and know where the gallery is and things like that. So
Oh, yes. And if I could just add one more thing.
yes, definitely.
I have a show going on. For those who don't know, I have a solo exhibition at the Whaling Museum. So I said years ago when I was a student, I, always wanted to show at the art museum, and I did, and that was a big deal for me. And then 3 years after that, I was invited to have a solo show at the Whaling Museum, which is again a huge deal. And this show is all about New Bedford. It's called In the Neighborhood, and it's in my collage, mixed media collage style. They're large scale works. So please check it out. The show has been extended till November. So I'm very pleased and proud of the work. Also, one thing I didn't mention before was another source of inspiration for me is New Bedford. I'm living right here. So this is the second series of New Bedford works I have done. And I usually work with collages when it comes to New Bedford. I think it's a great medium to show the whimsical side of it, also the textures and the grit along with the beauty. So I just put that in.
No, that's great. Thank you. Definitely need to check that out. So that's exciting. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. So I don't know, Midori, did you have any intro into our little, do you want to do a little introduction
Oh,
section?
sure. Yeah. So
We can take like 5 or 10 minutes to just kind of do a little networking session, and then we'll move into Eva's session.
okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
So it's really just going around and introducing yourself, talking about what kind of artwork you do, where you live, and then I have a very silly little exercise that you can do. And essentially, you get 4 objects to choose, and you have to choose which one you think describes yourself. So the 4 to choose from, first one is a bathtub. The second one is a coffee maker. The third is a window. And the fourth is a vacuum cleaner. So, which of those 4 objects would you say describes who you are and why? And I can go ahead and start. I'm Midori Evans. I'm the founder of Midori Creativity. I do creativity coaching and creativity workshops. I live in Westport, and I'm a photographer and a musician and a writer, so I'm constantly behind because I can never decide what thing I want to spend my time and energy on. But recently I've been doing more of my photography work, and I've been kind of just playing around. I've been taking little random everyday objects and playing with some flashlights and some interesting colored lights and making these very abstract images. And someday when I get enough of a body of work together, I'll show you guys some of them. But I've been having fun with that. And I think of the 4 objects, I have to go with that I'm a window, because I'm often feeling like I'm looking out at the world and not always engaging with it as much as I want to be. So that's of the 4 objects, that's what I would pick.
That's great. I like this exercise.
I can go next.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eva. You'll learn more about me and my artistry soon, but I'm a multidisciplinary artist. For the context of the exercise, I would also go with window out of the 4 things. Window came across to resonated with me because I feel I try to be transparent and authentic in all that I do. And I see the window as some, that you can see and is clear in that. And then window in the terms of artistry that, it's a window to your soul, right? That's what artist is, where art is, you bring what is invisible to the visible. And the window has the ability to do that, to show us different things. So definitely window out of the 4. So just a fun exercise.
That.
I'm Joanne Blondin, and I guess I'd have to go with coffee maker to describe myself, because I don't really do much of anything without a cup of coffee. Certainly at the beginning of the day, I've learned not to drink it all day, and if it's available all day, I try and just have a little bit. I write, and I write a lot of different things. I write fiction and nonfiction. Um, a smidge of it has been published. I'm trying to get more fiction published. What else? Um, yes, because and I shied away from using window because I'm here in a. I don't. Yes, I have windows in my condo, but I never look out them. They're all the blinds are always down. Um, and I tell myself it's because I don't want people peeking in and looking at me. You know, I want some privacy. But I think it's more that I don't want to see what's outside. I'm inside my head quite a lot, and and what I write about for the most part is are characters that I've just made up. So I'm coming out today to meet who's ever in this workshop and to hear what's going on and and I'm taking notes all the time. So it's an experience. I can handle it.
That's great. It's nice to meet you, Joanne. Where are you located?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in Cambridge,
Oh, cool.
Massachusetts. So I think just north of you or something.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Great. I can go next. My name's Dina Hayden. I am a visual artist, and I also wear a lot of other hats. I run the Co-Creative Center, and I'm also on the team for Super Flat New Bedford, which is a mural program in the city. I also went to UMass Dartmouth, where Allison went for my undergrad, and my artwork is mostly focused on fiber-based sculpture, and I use a lot of nature and natural materials in my work. And that's just like my favorite thing to do. And I love meeting artists and listening to their story and connecting with other artists. And I also thought I was thinking about a bathtub, but I think I'm more of a window person. I love looking out the window, which is funny to hear you, Joanne, say that you don't. But I'm always, if I can find a window, I'll just look out of it. I love being outside. So, and I also enjoy the line between like interior and exterior. So I just always find that fascinating. So yeah, so I would say I'm a window.
My name is Iva Brito. I am an artist, a multidisciplinary artist. This is one of the hats that I wear, and I'll go further into that. My indigenous roots come from West Africa, Cape Verde. That's where I was born and came here as a young girl and to New Bedford, Massachusetts, and have been here ever since. I currently serve as the director of the Women's Center at Bristol Community College. So that's another hat that I that I wear, and I'm a proud mom as well. So I will share in this. My artistry comes in different forms, and ever since I was a kid, art has always been part of me. Whether it was, doing a fashion show for my parents, or drawing, writing. So it makes a lot of sense that I'm a multidisciplinary artist because it comes in different ways. I will share a little bit about my website. I will go to my homepage. So this is my website. And so I'll share a little bit about myself through my website. As I mentioned, I was born in the Cape Verde Islands, and just really use art in different forms, and this is an example of some of my artistry. I'm also a author. I'm the author of the book that you see, and then you see the original piece right there actually behind me. And my friend was like, it was above me, but a friend of mine was like, you need to put it closer. So I painted that one back in 2011. And I just really loved that image of this woman that was just leaping into the air and free and just wanted to see what was there to explore and was fearless. So that was what I chose as one of my images for the cover of my book. So this is a book of poetry that I published in 2016, and it's titled Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts. And the reason I did that title for the book, it's because, you know, Essence speaks to my roots, my African roots, and my connection to the Cape Verde Islands, which is a big part of who I am. And my family has always, I've gone back since I came as a young girl, so it's a big part of it. Tone speaks to my love for the arts and the different form of arts, whether it's writing, whether it's acting, whether it's creating art in different forms with different mediums. So that's all the different tones of arts that are within me and that I use. And Whispers speaks to my connection to spirituality and to nature and just feeling connections in that way, which is also another big part of me and always evolving in that space. And then Shouts is my commitment to social justice and activism and a lot of the work that I do in professional settings, and use my art also as a form to speak to different issues of social justice and activism. So those different categories, so all the poems fall into one of those categories: essence, tones, whispers, and shouts. And that's how I did the book. And the book kind of came out of almost shaming. I've done a lot of spoken word poetry throughout a lot in New Bedford and then also throughout the nation. And many times I would do a poem and folks would say, I really like that poem. Do you have a book? I'm like, I don't. So I got tired of saying that. So eventually that's how the book came about, Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts. And I was really fortunate because I was an art in residence a few years back for the New Bedford Whaling National Parks. And as part of that art in residency, I was able to kind of combine two of my love for words and my love for arts. And I was challenging myself to pick a poem and then do a piece to go with that poem. So if you did go to my closing, I had a poem on top and then the piece in the bottom. So people would read the poem and then see the image. So it's kind of a little bit of both together. Also, you know, I feel that art is a great tool for healing and really connecting with us, you know, through creativity. So I did do a graduate certificate in expressive art to Salva Regina that really just validated what I knew subconsciously and how art can be used as a healing modality, because I used it throughout my life when times that, you know, I was feeling certain ways. I was able to go into the arts and dive in, and it was my therapy. So using that now to support others, especially women, in creating spaces where you can use art. And I am a licensed social worker as well. So that's a lot of the work that I do in supporting students at the college. So I'll go to some of my paintings. It's definitely one of my goals is to put more pieces up. But this piece I did do during my artist in residency. And so this one was called Music, which is a poem that is in my book. And so in that book, in that piece, it speaks to how I use all the different instruments and then talk about, you know, the body and so forth. So I thought it was interesting to kind of play with that and the woman's body, how it is beautiful and musical, if you will, with curves and so forth. So this was in playing on the image of the guitar. And what I've noticed is that I've, you know, as I grow as an artist, I become more and more mixed media, multidisciplinary, in that I don't want just the oil or acrylic, I want texture. So there is, if you had this piece a little closer, there is a little texture to it. And then in the piece, so this was music that I did as part of that artist in residency. I'm gonna move this a little bit. This is the image that like I said, that was the cover of the book, and woman on fire, her hair is like on fire. She's just ready to jump out into the air. And this was just acrylic At one point I went back to the Cape Verde Islands. Oh, actually, I didn't do this piece in Cape Verde, but I did go back to the Cape Verde Islands and had kind of like a little break in a little pause in the career life. And I went back to visit my parents, and they were doing a painting class, and I was a little late to the class. So the professor said, well, I'm not sure if you can come in at this point, but he said, what was my painting level? And I'm like, I don't really paint that much. And he said, can you draw? And I said, that I can do. So he gave me an assignment to draw something and come back. And he said, okay, you can draw. And to his point was like, if you can draw, you can paint. And I said, okay. And so I kind of took up on that challenge. So I learned some painting while I was in the Cape Verde Islands, and he became a good friend. So that was a little bit, so I didn't go to school per se for painting, but just continue to evolve and mix and tweak and see how I can grow in that. I feel like this is a piece I did do during my art in residency. And as you can see, this is kind of like the mixed media shards and silhouettes. So if you had this piece in front of you, it's almost like broken glass on top. And then I didn't, when I first did it, I was just kind of playing. I did a lot of resin, and I've noticed that during my art in residency, and I do like the effect of resin and how it looks. I don't like it as a medium to work with because it's really challenging when, it's sticky, but I do like the aesthetics of what it looks like. And in this piece, it's almost, as you see, you look from far away, you kind of see like there's silhouettes in the background. So that was kind of cool with this, and just playing with how media can make different feelings and looks with it. So that was a piece with my art in resin. This piece was the one piece that wasn't specific to a poem. This was the one piece that I felt had a little bit of all the pieces. So what I did when I was doing the other pieces, I would put whatever paint into this one. So this has, a lot of layers into it. It may not look from far away because the brown kind of and the black were more demanding and covered it. But this was kind of the encompassing of all my pieces for that art in residency. Was another piece. This is a real old piece. This is one of the ones I did during the class, and just, starting to work with painting and learning. And this was like a sunset at the beach that we often would paint outside when we were in class. So this was the sun setting on the island of Cape Verde where I was at a few years back. And this wasn't part of my art in residency. This is another piece that I did. So the island I am from is Boa Vista in the Cape Verde Islands, and it's known for its beautiful beaches. And this was actually the ruins of a factory that they used to make fine china on the beach. And I really loved this beach, and I really thought it was cool to kind of have this, fine sand, and then you have the roughness of this texture of this ruins on the beach. So I thought that was an interesting piece. So this is a close-up one, and this is kind of the far away image. If you were standing far away, that they have this really big chimney, and at one point that would, the smoke would come out of that, and that was a lot of people on the island used to work in this factory, but through time and wind and weathering, it's changed a lot. But that's kind of like, if you were there, you see these big massive machines, and then you see sand. So it's kind of a cool space. So I did that piece. This one was, again, just playing with mixed media. This wasn't part of my artist in residency, but using nature to kind of play around with different pieces was another piece that I had. This one I actually need to change it. It's a little blurry, but this was just, I believe it was acrylic on this one, or no, actually I think this was oil, but I saw an image that was similar that kind of inspired this piece and this balance of between the man and the woman and supporting one another. And this one, depending either way, how you position it, it's always, you can use it with the man on top or the woman on top. So I thought it was this never ending evolution of relationships in this piece. And that's all I really need to add more pieces to my website. That's the work in progress, but you get a feel for some of my artistry in terms of my painting, as well as I have poetry that I'm sure that some of you have heard me do poetry at different spots throughout the city. But I'm always trying to see how I can use my art in terms of, having people think, and activism as part of my work. During the art and residency, we did a Cape Verdean heritage tour. That was really nice too, because New Bedford has such a rich history of Cape Verdean roots. So we did that as well. So that was really interesting to do that. We partnered on different events. So that was a little bit about my artistry. At one point as well, I worked, now Allison kind of reminded me of that, at Artworks in New Bedford. And I was the youth the mural project that we had. Was a youth mural project. And so we did a couple of murals throughout the city. The mural that is on the pier, Percy Wright did that one. It's on a little shed. We worked on that.
Yeah.
Fun. That was way before all these other murals. We were worked at Artwork.
Wow, that's cool. I always wonder who was behind this, so that's cool.
Yeah, and most recently, I feel like my art is always evolving. One of my poems is now turned into a film, and that's what I was trying to show you, but I'll show it at a different time. So an artist in California, a film director, he actually really liked one of my pieces, Exhale for Hope, that was done as a result to some of the loss of Black and brown bodies with police brutality and so forth. So he decided that he wanted to put into film. So we did a short film to that piece, and it was filmed partly in New Bedford and partly in Rhode Island as part of that.
Wow, and that's a poem, like a written piece? Yes,
it's in my book.
Okay.
It's one of the poems in my book, Exhale for Hope. And in that piece, I kind of, the reason I called it Exhale for Hope is I feel like many of us feel that there's this pressure of racism and oppression and sexism and classism. That one was really based more on racism and feeling like, you just want to breathe because it's just one more thing. It's another thing that's happening. So we're trying to exhale, and that exhale is kind of the hope that we all need. So that was the premise of that. And in that poem, I use the metaphor of like a hurricane or a natural disaster, an earthquake, that our earth is kind of shaking and we can't handle it anymore, which I think we can all relate to, that we feel like all these things are happening, and just like Mother Nature, it's impacting everyone involved. And so that was kind of, the beginning of it goes, Mother Earth's piercing cry echoes around the world, shaking our conscious core. Future windows shattered, broken family trees, blood-stained roots, category 25, violence, earthquake. So that's the first few lines of that poem, to that, it's, this systematic racism and oppression is impacting all of us, and it's a earthquake that is happening, and we really need to all be aware of it and see how we can be solutionaries and find spaces that we can exhale. So that was the premise of that.
That's great. Yeah, if you have the link, if you want to send it along, and I can send it out and put it under the notes for this as well. That would be great to see it.
Sure.
I did have a question, and we can open up to Q&A too. I was wondering how your poetry and your written word inspires your visual work and vice versa, or how you see it working together. Does one always come first? And I was just wondering your process.
Well, I thought it was really an interesting challenge for the art in residency to use my poems as my inspiration for my pieces, because I didn't usually do that. I've done painting and artwork, and I've done writing, but they don't usually mesh in that way. So that was interesting. Like, I look at this piece, music, it's not what I think I would have thought of, when I read the poem, right? It's, but what I like about it, it forced me to look at how do I translate, it started with an emotion, whatever with the music. Actually, that piece came out of the late Armstead Christian was doing an event at um, the Old Main event, and he was doing a poetry night. So he asked me to collaborate with him, and he wanted me to write some poetry. So that was kind of a Valentine's Day event. So it was kind of more like erotic poetry, love, all kind of things. So that's how I kind of used music to look at it in that way. And it was something that I was not usually what I wrote about. So he pushed me to write in that. So I wrote that piece, and then I looked at it, and it was like, how do I translate that emotion? And I thought about, it was a very sensual piece, that music, if you read it. And so I thought about what it made me think about the body and lovemaking and how music can be all these things. So then I was thinking of the woman's body, and I said, this is it. And then I wanted to play with the violin or guitar, and how, there's that piece there, that it's musical, it's beautiful. And so this piece, a lot of times during the art and a lot of people had many different thoughts, because you can go so many places with it. I wanted to make it not so intentional that it was playing with the guitar. I thought about putting the strings, but then I said no, it could be seen like that's tattoos on her. So I kind of wanted to make it really broad.
Yeah, and within this painting itself, it has a symmetry and a balance to it, where there's like an inner harmony. So that's interesting to hear the dialogue with the written poem as well. But yeah, I'll have to check out more of your poetry in your book too. I did want to open up to anyone else who had questions for Eva.
So Eva, I have a question. You said that when you were doing the residency, that it was an unusual way for you to think about your work, to link the visual with your poetry. Do you feel like you now enjoy that more and you want to do more of it, or was it more of an exercise that you explored and you don't want to really do anymore?
No, I really enjoyed it, actually. It was a challenge, because I thought of, during this art and residency, how can I challenge myself in different ways? But I continue to write, and I read some pieces, and I'm like, oh, where could this go, as a visual image? So it's something that I continue to do. I haven't done that much, to be honest with you. It's more right now just thinking about it. But it's interesting, because then you can continue to grow with that. And then you, for instance, with the music, you read music, it's one thing, and then you see that image, and then it's like, what's the response to that? So it's a dialogue that can continue to do that. I recently wrote another piece, and it's brings me to this very mystical place. When I wrote it, it was about dreams. And then I'm like, what would that look like? And, as you know, as an artist, you start somewhere and you don't know where the end piece. So it's kind of going on this journey that you don't know where it will lead. So I think it's a great way. It's a great challenge for folks, in my opinion.
I'm really intrigued by that one piece, the music one. And it seems like there's a lot there if you wanted to explore other instruments and there's so much there.
And I just chose that instrument, but as part of writing that piece, I wanted to use a lot of different instruments. So if you did hear the piece, I name at least 10 instruments in it.
Okay.
But when I was thinking about it, I could have went that route and included a lot of different instruments, but I felt like the piece felt whole and sensual when you hear it. So I wanted to go with the sensation that I felt like the poem brought, as opposed to the visual of just like I mentioned all these instruments. So as an artist, you always have to make that distinction of how you want to fine tune it. So that was my decision. But in the piece, I mentioned a lot of different instruments.
Yeah, and there's a way I work a lot with poetry in my work, not indirectly, but there's a way to kind of illustrate what you're creating with words, or what you're saying, kind of connect into like the emotion and like the movement within the writing to create it. So it's so abstract, like, to bring it together, and it's really hard to visualize. And for me, it's always just looking back and then seeing the connections. So
No, that's a good point. You have to decide, because the writing piece is more left brain and the technical piece of it. And then you bring it to this very, nonlinear space within the arts. And then you have to decide how much of it you're going to hold on to that is like true to the statements and the words, and how much of it you're like, I'm just going to have to let that go. So that was a very interesting piece for me, because I think about my thought process in writing it. How do I want to focus more on that, or do I want to focus on what, the emotions that it embodied, or what the movement from that piece, as opposed. So that was an interesting challenge, if you will, to figure out how much of the balance you're going to get on both ends.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's a good example, I feel like, for people to see and learn about your process. So great. Well, thank you. I don't know if anyone else
I have
has.
a question.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And the thing, I might have missed you saying this. So you had this book of poetry before that you did before. So when you were in the residency and you were painting from the poems themselves that were already written. Okay. And so have you worked the other way around, where you did a painting and then came up with poetry after, or that kind of back and forth?
I haven't. It's funny. I'm looking at another piece, and I actually did another piece. I told Midori that I haven't, but there's a piece in front of me that's not on my website, and I wrote a poem, and it's a result of that, because I was like, what is this going to look like? So I wanted to do that. So I haven't done the opposite. I haven't found a piece and then wrote from there, so that could be a new challenge. It's been, I think it's more challenging to go from poetry to a visual image, because what I spoke to before, and how deciding what from that poem you're going to take, because usually a poem has so many, you can go so many different spaces and different ways with a poem. You'll start here, maybe go there, and then what part of that poem, what do you want to embody into the piece? Well, it could be seen the same way, but I think it's a little easier to go from the image to writing, because then you have more liberty to go all different places in your writing. And with the piece, you have that square, if that, So I think it's a little easier, but I haven't done the latter.
That would be a cool collaboration between artists too, like right. It could, like, writing about other, like, let's say Allison's paintings, or vice versa.
That has happened before. Like, I have painted from somebody's poems or written work.
Yeah.
And somebody has, like I had poets write, poems, etc., about my work. But the question I have for Eva is, how does it feel when you do your own? Like, I could imagine, because it was difficult for me to then interpret somebody else's work and then come on. But when it's your own, you might think it's easier, but I don't know if it is.
No, it definitely had its challenge. It had its challenge because part of my personality when it comes to art is I try to be a perfectionist and think like it's not done right and keep going. And you have to get to that point, especially with your poem, to say like, you can't capture everything that poem says, or you have to really just get the essence of it into the piece, or else the piece will go everywhere and you might lose, the flavor. So it wasn't easy, but it was, it really made you think about what's important about this, this poem. What is it that it really embodies in one way? Because I think with the example with the music, that woman's body does speak to music, right? So it does capture it in many ways, as opposed to if I had done 5 different instruments in this way, I think that one thing can get all of it in one. So it's making those choices. That was the challenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow, very cool. Well, I think we'll wrap up. If anyone else has any last questions or anything they want to add.
I did want to put a plug in. I am teaching a course this April, for April being Poetry Month.
Yeah.
Through the Zeitarian Theater, they have creative classrooms. So I'm teaching a course, Writing Through the Elements, which is a 4-week course, and each week we'll look at one of the elements: earth, water, air, and fire. And it's really an opportunity to connect with nature and with creative writing, expressive writing, and looking at mindfulness as well. I actually taught it last year for the first time during the pandemic and being quarantined. I felt like that was a way to connect with folks, and folks enjoyed it. So I'm going to do that again. And you can find that information on my website or the Zeitarian Theater. But that was,
When does that start?
it's April 22nd.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's a great. And is it for any age group or like writing level?
Any writing level for sure. I would say teens to adults. I was mostly adults was in the
Okay,
group, so it's really catered more to adults. But yes,
cool.
needed prior
That
experience.
sounds like a great combination of things right now for spring.
So I wanted to
Awesome.
ask another question, which is just if you had to in one or for both Allison and Eva, if you had to in one or two sentences, just say what you're envisioning for the next year in terms of where your artwork is going. Are there any new directions that you're heading in?
Not sure. I'm going with the flow. I am experimenting some more, just like I've learned to not take myself as seriously, and especially this past year. So I'm just going to be, I didn't mention before, but I was doing during last year when the pandemic just hit, I was doing a lot of art journaling, because it healed my soul. And I did gratitude journals. So I would go on Facebook Lives and just do some gratitude journals for a couple months. So once a week. And so that has opened up a lot for me. And it was really, so I've been doing a lot of more journaling. So I'm excited to take that to the next level. I'm actually going to be doing some courses in that, teaching that as well. So that's what I'm focusing on more, just the art journal as a place where anybody can just express themselves, not take themselves too seriously, especially at these times. It really is a healing thing. Your art journal, it's like journaling, you're writing, you're drawing, you're painting. So that's where I am right now, because it's all about self-preservation and just, going inside. So that's for me.
Great.
Absolutely. um, Similar to Allison, I want to continue to explore. I want to do more art. I've been really involved in many different things. So finding the time to do more art is part of it. I want to do more spaces too that I'm teaching and using arts as a means for healing and connecting with others. So workshops and involving, art and writing as well. Doing women's circles. I've done that with the Women's Center, using expressive arts to support individuals. Especially there's a lot of women right now that are feeling isolated and can't connect with others. So using it as a tool to support others to connect and to heal, because as we know, it has those ability to do that, and infusing nature as much as I can to do that.
Thank you. And thank you to both of you for sharing with us your work. We're so lucky to have you in our city.